Jerry Springer removed his glasses and sat down. 300 people held their breath because the man who had stood through chaos for 27 years just sat down, and everyone knew something was very, very wrong. The studio was in full meltdown. 2 guests screaming at each other. Security moving in. The audience on their feet chanting, "Jerry! Jerry! Jerry!" at full volume. Classic Springer chaos. The kind that had made the show infamous. The kind that viewers tuned in to see every single day. A woman named Michelle was standing center stage, finger pointed at the man across from her, her voice cutting through the noise. "You are a liar! You told me she meant nothing!" The man, Derek, was shouting back, veins bulging in his neck. "I never said that! You're twisting my words!" Michelle lunged forward. Security guard Steve grabbed her shoulders. Another guard stepped between them. The audience screamed louder. Jerry stood off to the side with his microphone, watching with that familiar expression of bemused detachment. This was his show. This was what America expected. He'd seen this exact scene play out 3,000 times before. But then Michelle said something that changed everything. "Tell him!" She screamed, not at Derek, but at the third guest who'd been sitting quietly in the corner chair this entire time. "Tell him what you told me backstage! Tell him!" The third guest, a young woman, maybe 25, who'd barely spoken since walking on stage, stood up slowly. Her name was Rachel. Her hands were shaking. "I can't," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Tell him!" Michelle screamed again. And Rachel looked directly at Jerry Springer. Not at the cameras. Not at Derek. At Jerry. "Mr. Springer," she said, her voice breaking. "I need to tell you something. About why I'm really here." The audience didn't hear it. They were still chanting. Security was still restraining Michelle. Derek was still yelling. But Jerry heard it. And something in Rachel's eyes made him stop. He raised his hand. One simple gesture. The audience fell silent immediately. 27 years of conditioning. When Jerry raised his hand, "You shut up." Michelle stopped mid-scream. Derek froze. Security stepped back, confused. And then Jerry did something he had never done in 3,000 episodes of controlled chaos. He removed his glasses. Slowly. Folded them. And sat down on the simple stool in the center of the stage. The studio went completely, utterly silent. Jerry raised his hand. The chanting stopped. The entire studio went silent. What the audience didn't know, what the cameras hadn't captured yet, was what Rachel had shown Jerry 30 seconds before the taping started. She'd approached him backstage while the audience was filing in. Jerry had been reviewing his note cards, preparing for what he thought was a standard "My boyfriend cheated" episode. "Mr. Springer?" Rachel's voice had been so quiet he almost didn't hear her. He'd looked up. "Yes?" She'd held out a photograph. Old. Worn at the edges. The kind of photo that had been carried around for years. Jerry had taken it, looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, and his entire face had changed. "Where did you get this?" His voice had been sharp, urgent. "My mother gave it to me before she died," Rachel had said. "She told me that if I ever got the chance, I should show it to you." "She said you'd remember?" Jerry had stared at the photograph. At the 2 people in it, young and smiling, standing in front of a Cincinnati courthouse in 1974. One of them was Jerry Springer, age 30, in a cheap suit, grinning at the camera. The other was a woman named Caroline Webb. Rachel's mother. "Your mother was Caroline?" Jerry's voice had been barely above a whisper. Rachel had nodded. "She died 6 months ago. Cancer. Before she died, she told me about you. About Cincinnati. About what happened." A production assistant had interrupted. "Jerry, we need you on stage in 2 minutes." Jerry had handed the photograph back carefully. "After the show. We'll talk after the show. I promise." But Rachel had shaken her head. No, Mr. Springer. I need to talk now. On camera. Because my mother made me promise something, and this is the only way I can keep that promise. And Jerry, against every instinct, against every producer's rule, had said, okay. So the episode had started. Michelle and Derek and their fake fight about infidelity, all of it staged, all of it designed to be the typical Springer chaos that would lead into Rachel's real revelation, which was supposed to be that she was Derek's other woman. Except that wasn't Rachel's revelation at all. Now, sitting on that stool in the center of the stage, his glasses in his hand, Jerry looked at Rachel and said quietly, Tell me. Tell everyone. What did your mother want you to say? Rachel's hands were trembling. Michelle and Derek, confused and forgotten, sat down in their chairs. The security guards stood frozen. The audience leaned forward in their seats, 300 people barely breathing. My mother, Rachel began, her voice shaking, was Caroline Webb. In 1974, she was a campaign volunteer for Jerry Springer's city council race in Cincinnati. A murmur went through the audience. Everyone knew Jerry had been a politician once. It was part of his origin story, the punchline to 1,000 jokes. From politician to trash TV host. She was 19. Rachel continued. And she fell in love with him. Jerry's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. They had an affair. It lasted 3 months. And then she got pregnant. The studio exploded. Not with Jerry! Jerry! Chants, but with genuine gasps of shock. This wasn't scripted chaos. This was real. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Rachel reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the photograph again. She held it up so the cameras could see. This picture was taken the day she told him. May 17, 1974. Outside the courthouse where he worked. She was 3 months pregnant. She told him she loved him. She told him she wanted to keep the baby. And she told him she would never tell anyone who the father was. Jerry's eyes were locked on the photograph. His hand gripped his glasses so tightly his knuckles had gone white. She kept that promise, Rachel said, tears streaming down her face now. For 43 years, she never told a single person. Not her husband who raised me. Not her friends. Not me. Until she was dying. Until the cancer had spread everywhere, and she knew she had maybe days left. The audience was completely silent. Michelle was crying. Derek had his head in his hands. Even the security guards were frozen, listening. She made me promise 2 things. Rachel continued. First, that I would never ask you for anything. No money. No acknowledgement. Nothing. She said you had your life, and she had made her choice, and she didn't regret it. And second? Jerry's voice was rough, barely controlled. Second, Rachel said, her voice breaking completely now, that I would tell you thank you. Jerry's head snapped up. Thank you? For what? For giving her me. Rachel was sobbing now. She said that affair, those 3 months with you, were the happiest of her life. Not because of the politics or the excitement or any of that. But because you treated her like she mattered. You listened to her ideas. You made her feel smart and capable and worthy. She stepped closer to where Jerry sat. The security guards didn't move to stop her. She said that when she told you she was pregnant, you offered to marry her. Right there. On the spot. You said you'd leave politics, you'd get a regular job, you'd do whatever she needed. And she said no. She told you she wouldn't let you throw away your dreams for a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Jerry said, his voice hoarse. I know, Rachel whispered. She knew too. But she also knew you were going to do important things. She believed in you. And she said the greatest gift you ever gave her, besides me, was respecting her choice. You didn't argue. You didn't fight. You trusted her to know what was best for her own life. Behind the scenes, Jerry made a decision that no producer had ever seen him make before. Jerry stood up slowly. He walked to the edge of the stage, looked directly at the control booth, and made a cutting gesture across his throat. The universal signal for stop recording. The red lights on the cameras stayed on. Director Brian Cohen's voice crackled through the studio speakers. Jerry, we're live. We can't stop. Then cut to commercial, Jerry said flatly. Now. Jerry, this is... Cut. To. Commercial. The studio lights dimmed slightly. The on-air signs went dark. They were in commercial break. The audience started to murmur, confused. This had never happened before. Jerry never stopped taping. Ever. He turned back to Rachel. You said your mother died 6 months ago? Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. What was her last name? After she got married? Morrison. Caroline Morrison. Jerry closed his eyes briefly. I sent flowers to a Caroline Morrison's funeral in Cincinnati last March. The obituary said she'd been a teacher. That she dedicated her life to education. That she was survived by a daughter. That was her, Rachel whispered. I didn't know, Jerry said, his voice cracking for the first time. I saw the obituary. I remembered her name. I sent flowers because I just thought it might be her. That maybe she'd remember me. I didn't know about you. She knew you sent them, Rachel said. The funeral home told her husband. He brought her the card before she died. She smiled when she read it. She said he remembered. Jerry's hands were shaking now. The famously unflappable host, the man who'd stood calmly through 27 years of fights and chaos and thrown chairs, was shaking. Why did you come here? He asked. Why this show? Why this way? Rachel smiled sadly. Because she said you'd built this whole life on not taking yourself too seriously. That you'd turned your biggest political scandal into a second career making people laugh at the absurdity of life. She said if I tried to reach you privately, you'd think I wanted something. But if I came on the show, you'd know I was serious. That I was willing to embarrass myself publicly, just like you did, to tell you the truth. What scandal? Someone in the audience called out. Jerry turned to face them. 300 people staring at him, waiting. Behind him, Rachel stood holding her mother's photograph. Michelle and Derek sat in their chairs, forgotten props in a show that had stopped being a show. In 1974, Jerry said slowly, addressing the audience directly, I was on Cincinnati's city council. I wrote a check to pay for services from a massage parlor. The check bounced. It became public. I resigned in disgrace. A few nervous laughs from the audience. This was public record. Jerry had told the story himself in interviews, usually as a self-deprecating joke. What I never told anyone, Jerry continued, his voice steady now, was that I wasn't alone when I went there. I went with Caroline. It was her idea. She thought it would be funny, rebellious, something to shock the stuffed shirt politicians I was working with. We went as a joke. And when my check bounced and the scandal broke, she wanted to come forward and tell the truth. But I wouldn't let her. I told her to stay silent. That I'd take the fall alone. That her life and her future mattered more than my political career. He looked back at Rachel. I thought protecting her meant walking away completely. I thought that was what she wanted. It was, Rachel said firmly. She never regretted it. She told me you gave her the freedom to choose her own life. And she chose to raise me with a man who loved her. Who knew I wasn't his biological daughter but treated me like I was. She had a good life, Mr. Springer. A really good life. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Jerry walked back to his stool and sat down again. He looked at the photograph one more time, then carefully handed. Jerry walked back to his stool and sat down again. He looked at the photograph one more time, then carefully handed it back to Rachel. Keep it, he said quietly. It was always hers. Now it's yours. Rachel clutched the photograph to her chest, sobbing. And then Jerry did something that stunned everyone in the studio. He stood up, walked to Rachel, and hugged her. Not for the cameras. Not for the show. Just a father hugging his daughter for the first and only time. The audience rose to their feet. Not chanting. Not screaming. Just standing in silent witness to something real. When they pulled apart, Jerry looked directly into the camera. "We're not airing this episode," he said flatly. "What just happened stays in this room." He turned to the audience. "You were all here. You all saw it. But this doesn't leave this studio. This is hers. Not ours." 300 people nodded in agreement. The footage was never broadcast. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. In his final thought that day, recorded separately for a different episode, Jerry said something he never said before. "Sometimes the most important conversations happen when the cameras stop. Take care of yourselves and each other." Rachel kept the photograph. Jerry sent her one letter, 6 months later. It said only, "Your mother was right. Thank you." They never spoke again. But that was the agreement. That was the respect.